The first-class cabin of a transcontinental flight from New York to Los Angeles pulsed with the low hum of engines and the clink of crystal as Charles Rivera balanced his tray with practiced ease. "People like you shouldn't be serving real men in first class. You make me sick with that little sway in your step." Billionaire Thomas Harrington's voice sliced through the pressurized air like a blade, his words landing heavy and deliberate as he leaned back in his wide leather seat, eyes locked on the young flight attendant with open contempt. Charles froze, the champagne flute trembling slightly in his hand, the professional smile he had worn for 6 years of service cracking at the edges. At 28, he had faced whispers, stares, and outright rejection, but never from someone whose name commanded boardrooms and whose face stared back from every financial magazine. Thomas Harrington, 45 years old, tech titan and self-made emperor of digital empires, sat there in a tailored Navy suit, his associate a slick lawyer named Marcus nodding along with a smug grin. The other passengers shifted in their seats, some averting their eyes, others exchanging uncomfortable glances, a woman in row 3 whispering to her husband. Charles felt the heat crawl up his neck, his chest tightening with a familiar burn of humiliation that had chased him since coming out at 19 in a small Texas town where his father's silence had spoken louder than any shout. He set the glass down carefully, his fingers brushing the table edge. "Is there anything else I can assist you with, sir?" His voice stayed steady, the years of training holding the line, even as his mind spiraled back 4 years to a rainy night in Chicago. Back then, Thomas had not been this untouchable man. He had been a rising executive stealing kisses in the shadows of a discreet hotel bar, his laugh warm and unguarded, his hands tracing promises against Charles's skin in the dim light of a suite overlooking the river. They had shared 6 months of stolen weekends, whispered dreams of a future where Thomas would step out of the closet. Then the company exploded, Thomas's ambition swallowing him whole, and one morning the text stopped. The man vanished into board meetings and public appearances with a society fiancée on his arm. Charles had rebuilt himself piece by piece, earning his wings, flying routes that took him across the country, proving he belonged in these skies. Now the same man who once held him like he was the only truth in the world sat here, tearing him down in front of strangers to protect the lie he lived every day. Thomas took a slow sip of the fresh drink, his blue eyes flickering with something darker than mere arrogance. Inside his chest a storm raged, the kind he had buried under layers of power and denial. The sight of Charles, graceful and unapologetic in that fitted uniform, had hit like a mirror, forcing him to see the ghost of the man he used to be, the one who had felt alive only in those hidden hours. His father, the old oil baron back in Texas, had drilled it into him since childhood. Real men built empires, took wives, produced heirs. Anything else was weakness that could cost everything. Margaret, his fiancée, waited in Los Angeles, the perfect accessory for the life Thomas had scripted to silence the whispers. Mocking Charles was survival, a public declaration that Thomas Harrington stood on the right side of tradition. Yet as the words left his mouth, a flicker of regret twisted in his gut, the memory of Malibu's sand warm under their bare feet, Charles's laughter mixing with the waves as they had walked hand in hand 4 years ago, promising forever in the sunlight. He pushed it down deep, turning to Marcus with a forced chuckle. "These airlines hire anyone these days, right?" The flight stretched on in tense silence, Charles moving through the cabin on autopilot, refilling glasses, adjusting pillows, his mind replaying every choice that had led him here. He thought of his mother calling last week, voice tight with worry. "Honey, when are you going to find a nice girl, settle down? The family misses you at Christmas." The pressure never eased, even at 30,000 feet. His little sister had come out too, and the family fractures still bled. Charles had chosen truth over comfort, and today that truth cost him his dignity in front of the one man who had once made him believe love could conquer it all. By the time the wheels touched down at Lex, the cabin lights brightening for arrival, Charles stepped into the jet bridge, his shoulders squared, but his heart heavy with the weight of another scar. Thomas strode past without a glance, his associate laughing at some private joke, the billionaire, already moving on to the next conquest, unaware that in the row behind him a passenger had discreetly pocketed a phone, the video already uploading to a private cloud, the first crack in the empire Thomas had sacrificed everything to build. The Los Angeles night air hit Charles like a promise of anonymity. As he hailed a cab, the city lights blurring through, tears he refused to let fall. For Thomas, the penthouse awaited, Margaret's smile, the scripted life intact, or so he believed, until the shadows he had ignored began to stir with a truth he could no longer outrun. Charles pushed open the door to his modest apartment in West Hollywood, the familiar scent of lavender candles and fresh coffee greeting him like an old friend. The flight had drained him more than any turbulence ever could, the echo of Thomas's sneer lingering in his ears like a bad dream that refused to fade. He dropped his bag by the couch, collapsing onto the cushions, his uniform jacket still buttoned tight as if armor could protect the wound inside. Ryan, his roommate and closest confidant since flight school, emerged from the kitchen, 2 mugs in hand, his kind eyes searching Charles's face. "Rough one, how you look like you fought a dragon at 30,000 feet. Charles forced a smile, taking the coffee, the warmth seeping into his palms but doing nothing to thaw the ice in his chest. He recounted the incident, the words spilling out in a rush, the public humiliation, the way Thomas had looked at him not with recognition but with calculated disgust. Ryan listened without interruption, then pulled him into a hug, the kind of brotherly embrace that had kept Charles standing through countless rejections. "You are stronger than his hate, you always have been." Yet as Charles nodded, the memories flooded back unbidden. The Malibu beach where Thomas had once whispered, "I love you," under the sun, the Central Park walks where their hands had fit perfectly, the laughter that had felt like freedom. Those moments now twisted into knives, reminding him of the man Thomas had chosen to become, the one who mocked what they once shared to preserve his throne. Across town in his sprawling Beverly Hills estate, Thomas Harrington paced the marble floor of his home office, the city lights of Los Angeles twinkling beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows like distant stars he could never quite reach. Margaret had greeted him with her usual polished kiss, her diamond ring catching the light as she asked about the flight, her voice light but her eyes probing. He had brushed it off, claiming exhaustion, but inside the confrontation replayed on loop, the way Charles's face had fallen, the professional mask slipping to reveal the hurt Thomas knew he had caused. Guilt clawed him sharper than any business loss, the memory of their secret months in Chicago where Thomas had felt seen for the first time, the nights they talked about coming out together, the plans that dissolved when the board demanded a traditional image. His father had called that morning, voice gravelly with expectation, "Son, the merger with those conservative investors is key. Don't let anything personal derail it." The pressure had always been there, the family legacy, the expectation to marry, produce heirs, carry the name with pride. Thomas had chosen the path of least resistance, burying the truth under layers of power and pretense. Mocking Charles had been instinct to shield, raised in panic, but now alone in the silence, he felt the crack in his armor widen. He poured a scotch, the amber liquid burning down his throat as he stared at a hidden photo in his desk drawer, the one from Malibu, Charles's smile radiant against the ocean, the joy they had stolen in broad daylight, now a relic of a life he had abandoned. The next morning, the video surfaced quietly, at first a passenger's discreet recording of the cabin exchange uploaded to a niche forum, then sharing gay advocacy groups, the caption reading, "Billionaire Thomas Harrington exposes his true colors mid-flight." Charles woke to his phone buzzing with messages from crew members, friends, the clip already gaining traction, the comments a mix of outrage and support. He watched it once, the sound of Thomas's voice sending fresh waves of pain through him, the public nature amplifying every word into a spotlight he never asked for. Ryan sat beside him on the couch, hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to respond, but this could be your chance to speak truth to power." Charles hesitated, the moral dilemma twisting inside him, the choice between silence that protected his career and confrontation that might heal old wounds but invite more scrutiny. His family would see it, his father's disappointment, a fresh blow, the sister who looked up to him wondering if the fight was worth the cost. He chose quiet for now, calling it a personal day, the decision weighing like lead as he walked the streets of WeHo, the sun bright but his heart shadowed by the man who had once been his light. Thomas learned of the video during a breakfast meeting, his phone lighting up with alerts from his PR team, the associate Marcus Pale, as he slid the link across the table. "It's going viral, sir. We need damage control." Thomas felt the floor tilt, the scotch from last night sour in his stomach as he watched the clip, the camera catching his sneer in high definition, the passengers' reactions amplifying the cruelty. Panic surged, the fear of exposure, not just the mockery, but the deeper secret, the years of denial, the affair with Charles that could unravel everything if anyone dug deeper. He barked orders, cancel meetings, spin it as a joke gone wrong. But inside, the awakening stirred, faint and terrifying, the realization that the price of his choices was climbing higher than any stock drop. Margaret called, her voice tight. "Thomas, what is this? The investors are asking questions." The family pressure mounted, his father's text arriving like a hammer. "Fix this, or the board will." Thomas hung up the phone, his reflection in the window, showing a man trapped by the very empire he had built, the joyful memories of Central Park with Charles now a haunting reminder of what he had traded for power. The day stretched long, the tension coiling tighter as the video spread, the first tremors of the collapse beginning in the shadows he could no longer ignore. The days blurred for Charles as the video continued its relentless climb across social media platforms, the comments a torrent of support mixed with vicious backlash from Thomas's loyal followers. He returned to work on a shorter domestic route, the crew offering quiet solidarity, one captain pulling him aside. "We have your back, kid. This industry needs more voices like yours." Yet the inner conflict raged, the choice between letting the incident fade or using it to advocate for change, the moral weight of his decision pressing on him during quiet moments in the galley. His family called the conversation strained, his mother pleading, "Don't make it worse, honey, the neighbors are talking." The prejudice he had fought his whole life, now magnified by Thomas's power, the societal expectations that demanded he shrink to fit a mold he had long outgrown. In the evenings he walked the beaches near his apartment, the waves whispering memories of Malibu, where Thomas had once held him close, the sun warm on their skin, the laughter free from judgment. Those moments now felt like a dream, the man who had shared them a stranger, wearing the mask of cruelty. Ryan encouraged him to consider therapy, the support steady, but Charles wondered if healing meant confronting the past or burying it deeper, the dilemma tearing at his resolve as he weighed the cost of silence against the price of truth. Thomas's world narrowed to crisis meetings, his penthouse transformed into a war room, PR experts, lawyers, and board members huddled around screens, the video playing on loop, the damage spreading like wildfire to mainstream outlets. "This is not who we are," he insisted, his voice firm but his hands betraying a slight tremor as he faced the team, the inner turmoil a storm he could barely contain. The family pressure intensified, his father flying in from Texas, the old man's face etched with disappointment. "You know what this could do to the company? The investors are conservative. They won't tolerate this kind of optics." Margaret sat beside him, her hand on his knee, the engagement ring a constant reminder of the role. He played the life he had chosen over authenticity. Yet in the quiet hours after the meetings, Thomas found himself scrolling old messages, the ones from Charles 4 years ago, the words of love now a mirror to his own hypocrisy. The betrayal he had committed by leaving without explanation, the decision to mock on the flight, to bury the past, now boomeranging with devastating force. A board vote loomed, the possibility of stepping down hanging like a guillotine, the moral dilemma clear: choose the empire or the truth, the cost of either choice threatening to break him. He met with his assistant late one night, the young man loyal, but eyes flickering with unspoken judgment, the conversation turning to damage control, the air thick with the weight of secrets Thomas feared would surface next. The confrontation came unexpectedly, Charles spotting Thomas at a charity gala in downtown Los Angeles, the event meant to be neutral ground, the ballroom glittering under chandeliers. Thomas stood near the bar, his tuxedo impeccable, Margaret on his arm, when their eyes met, the recognition hitting like lightning. Charles approached, his heart pounding, the decision to speak or walk away hanging in the balance, the tension electric as guests milled around oblivious. "Why?" Charles asked, his voice low but steady, the single word carrying 4 years of unanswered questions, the pain, the love, the betrayal. Thomas faltered, his public mask slipping for a fraction of a second, the inner conflict raging, the choice between denial and honesty, the family legacy versus the man he once was. "It was a mistake," he muttered, the words hollow, even to his own ears, as Margaret glanced between them, sensing the undercurrent. The exchange ended abruptly, security discreetly intervening, but the seed was planted, the tension rising as both men left the gala changed the path to awakening beginning in the ashes of their shared history. Charles returned home, the encounter stirring old emotions, the dilemma of forgiveness versus justice weighing heavy, the societal pressures that had shaped Thomas now clear in the lines of his face. Thomas sat in his car, the city lights blurring the video's impact now personal, the moral crossroads looming larger, the price of his choices mounting with every passing hour. The aftermath of the gala encounter left Charles restless, the memory of Thomas's eyes, the flicker of regret stirring emotions he had long suppressed. He spent the weekend in Central Park, the same paths they had once walked, now empty of the joy that had defined their past, the bright sun contrasting the shadow in his heart. Ryan joined him for part of the day, the conversation turning to choices. "You deserve closure, but don't let him drag you back into hiding." The advice resonated, the inner conflict deepening as Charles weighed reaching out versus protecting his peace, the family expectations back home urging normalcy, the societal bias that painted men like him as threats. Work offered distraction, a long haul to Chicago, the city of their first meetings, the irony not lost as he served passengers with the same grace Thomas had mocked. The flight passed in quiet reflection, the decision forming slowly, the moral dilemma of whether exposure would heal or destroy the man he once loved. Thomas's empire began to fracture, the board calling an emergency session, the investors pulling funding citing reputational risk, the video, now paired with old photos from the gala surfacing online, the narrative shifting to hypocrisy. He paced his office, the weight of betrayal heavy as his assistant resigned, the young man citing moral differences, the leak of a private email where Thomas had vented frustrations about the lifestyle adding fuel to the fire. The family pressure reached a breaking point, his father disowning him publicly, the old man's statement to the press, We do not condone this behavior. Margaret left the ring on the table, her parting words cutting, "I can't live a lie anymore." Alone in the penthouse, Thomas confronted the truth, the choices that had led him here, the denial, the mockery, the sacrifice of love for power, the inner awakening slow and painful, the cost measured in lost contracts, lost respect, lost self. He found himself driving to Malibu, the beach where happiness had once lived, the waves crashing as memories flooded the joyful moments with Charles, now a beacon in the darkness, the dilemma clear, redemption or ruin, the path forward uncertain but inevitable. The two men crossed paths again at a small advocacy event, Charles invited as a speaker, Thomas attending under the guise of damage control, the tension palpable as they stood on opposite sides of the room. Charles took the stage, his voice steady, sharing his story, the flight incident, the deeper wounds, the choice to live openly despite the price, the audience hanging on every word. Thomas listened from the back, the words striking deep, the moral conflict raging, the family legacy he had clung to now in ruins, the societal prejudices he had perpetuated now turned against him. After the event, they spoke in a quiet corner, the conversation raw, the betrayals laid bare, the decisions that had shaped them, the cost each had paid. Charles offered no easy forgiveness, the dilemma of trust versus healing hanging between them, the tension thick with unspoken love and pain. Thomas left the event changed, the awakening gaining momentum, the video's damage now a catalyst for self-reflection, the empire crumbling, but the man emerging from the ruins. The video's reach exploded overnight, major networks picking it up, the hashtag trending, the public divided between calls for accountability and defenses of free speech. Charles found himself in the center, the media requests pouring in, the choice to amplify his voice or retreat, the inner turmoil intense as he consulted with Ryan, the support steady, but the decision his alone. His family called the conversation explosive, his father's anger. "You are ruining lives with this nonsense." The societal pressure mounted, the prejudice manifesting in online threats, the moral dilemma of standing firm or protecting those he loved, the cost of advocacy clear in the sleepless nights. Work became a sanctuary, the flights offering escape, the camaraderie of the crew, a reminder of belonging, the past with Thomas a distant echo, yet ever present in quiet moments. Thomas's downfall accelerated, the board voting him out, the stock plummeting, the empire he had built on denial fracturing under the weight of truth. He retreated to a cabin in the mountains, the isolation forcing confrontation, the memories of Central Park joyful walks, the laughter, the connection now a mirror to his isolation. The betrayal from his inner circle, the assistant who had recorded private rants, the family turning away, the fiancé gone, the moral choices that had led to this point laid bare, the awakening painful, but liberating, the price paid in lost power, the gain in self, the dilemma of rebuilding or disappearing. He reached out to Charles, the message simple, "I need to talk," the response coming after days, the meeting set in neutral ground, the tension building as the confrontation loomed, the truths to be faced, the cost to be acknowledged. The meeting took place in a quiet cafe, the air thick with history, Charles arriving first, his heart guarded, Thomas entering with the weight of defeat in his posture. The conversation unfolded raw, the mockery explained his fear, the past affair admitted the reasons for leaving, the family pressure, the societal expectations that had twisted him into the man on that flight. Charles listened, the inner conflict raging, the choice to forgive the betrayal or hold to justice, the love that lingered, complicating every word. Thomas confessed the video had been the wake-up, the secret recording of his private homophobic rant captured by a disillusioned employee, the ultimate betrayal mirroring his own, the circle complete. The dialogue stretched hours, the emotions deep, the drama of redemption versus consequence, the decisions shaping their futures, the price each had paid in different ways, the tension easing into tentative understanding, the path forward uncertain but open. The media storm intensified, the video now part of a larger narrative, the hypocrisy of power, the cost of silence, the societal debate raging across platforms. Charles chose to speak publicly, a carefully worded statement, the decision born of reflection, the moral dilemma resolved in favor of truth, the family reaction mixed, the support from the community overwhelming, the personal cost high, but the integrity intact. His flights resumed, the passengers recognizing him, the interactions a mix of respect and curiosity, the inner strength growing, the prejudice faced with grace, the awakening of his own voice, the reward for the pain. Ryan stood by, the friendship deepening, the choice to live fully affirmed, the joy in small moments, the contrast to the drama a grounding force. Thomas's isolation deep in the cabin a refuge, the reflections endless, the family dissownment, the business lost, the empire reduced to echoes, the inner conflict resolving into acceptance, the choices of the past, the price paid, the societal pressures that had molded him now seen clearly, the moral awakening complete, the man emerging different, the cost measured in freedom. He reached out again, the conversations with Charles tentative, the trust rebuilding slowly, the shared history, a foundation, the love that had never died, stirring the dilemma of a second chance, the betrayal forgiven but not forgotten, the tension of new beginnings, the decision shaping a different future. The confrontation with his father came via video call, the old man unyielding, the exchange heated, the family legacy versus personal truth, the moral divide clear, the cost of reconciliation high, the decision to walk away painful but necessary. Thomas returned to Los Angeles, the city once his kingdom, now a place of rebuilding, the video's damage, a chapter closed, the man ready for the next, the inner peace tentative but real. The public narrative shifted, the video sparking broader conversations, the prejudice, the pressure, the cost of hiding, the societal change slow but visible. Charles continued his work, the advocacy growing, the choice to use his platform, the moral dilemmas resolved in action, the family softening, the support building, the life he had fought for affirmed. The encounters with Thomas increased the bond, reforming, the joy returning in small ways, the past integrated, the future opening, the tension replaced by understanding, the price paid leading to growth. Thomas rebuilt slowly, the business ventures smaller, the power redefined, the family distance accepted, the inner conflict settled, the awakening full, the man he had mocked now the one offering grace, the irony not lost, the cost of the video, the catalyst for truth. The betrayal from his circle mended in unexpected ways, the assistant returning, the apology accepted, the circle of trust reformed, the decisions leading to a balanced life. The dust settled on the empire's ruins, Thomas standing amid the remnants, the man he had become, a far cry from the one on that flight, the choices, the betrayals, the pressures all woven into a tapestry of growth, the societal prejudices confronted, the moral awakening complete. Charles stood beside him, the bond renewed, the joyful moments of the past now echoed in the present, the Central Park walks, the Malibu embraces, the love enduring, the drama resolved, and understanding the price paid by both, the foundation for something real. The family pressures eased, the societal change visible in small victories, the inner conflicts quieted, the decisions leading to this moment, the cost measured in wisdom. In the end, was Thomas's devastating downfall the righteous price for his public cruelty, or merely the heartbreaking consequence of the very societal prejudices and family pressures that had twisted him into the man he became? True or false?